Sunday, 17th of March. And today's totally features Tim Spiers. Hello, Tim.
Hi, James.
Hello. JJ Bull.
Hello.
Hi, JJ. And also Matt Davies-Adams.
Hello, James.
All right, Matt. You've been a bit down of late, haven't you? Trapped in this kind of axis of depression of supporting Forest and living in Chelsea TV and stuff. But hopefully this weekend brought a smile to your face.
Elements of it certainly did.
Yeah.
Yes. Others made my hangdog expression even worse. But I'm trying to be more mature and not let football govern my moods quite so much.
Well, that doesn't sound so much fun. When you hosted the show 2 weeks back, which I thought was terrific, and you at the start you asked everyone for their favourite bits of the weekend. Mm-hmm. So, what was your favourite bit then of this weekend?
Well, when the team sheets dropped for Chelsea under-18s against Reading under-18s on Saturday morning, I thought it would be Nigel Freelove, the assistant referee, which is probably the best name I've ever heard in football. But I think I'd probably have to give it to Axel Disasi's.
When he goes home, what road does he take?
The Freelove Freeway, I would have thought.
Hopefully.
But yeah, the own goal trumped it, didn't it? Because it was a quite... I mean, we've had some stupendous FA Cup football, and you could pick any of half a dozen moments, but to see somebody knock a 40-yarder into their own net, it is something quite glorious, I think.
It certainly was. JJ, did you have a favourite bit?
Yeah, I saw the comedian Larry Dean do a set on Friday in Leytonstone. It was great.
Good.
Yeah.
Did he mention football in his...
No, he didn't.
Comments?
No.
All right.
I think he's a good stand-up, though.
What was the best joke that he said?
He does a lot of... I don't want to say his jokes because I'm not going to do them in a funny way.
Obviously, if he were here, that would be even better. But we don't have him.
I don't have him. He had some great jokes.
Okay, then. Tim Spiers.
So I always like to pick something sort of unique in these questions. So
Okay.
Something you've sort of never seen before. I've never seen a player booed because his free kick was so bad before. I was watching this on the bus on the way into the studio. This is Raheem Sterling. It was there was 5 minutes of build up to this because there'd been a long VAR check for the red card. Was it a penalty? Then Leicester made a sub, and Cole Palmer's just stood over the ball, ready to, because it's got to be a dink because it's centimetres outside the penalty area. It's got to be a dink from Cole Palmer, like Ronald Koeman style against England in '93. But instead, Raheem Sterling, his run up is so long, he's not even in the shot of the camera, and then he harumphs it into the top tier. It must have landed in the Thames. I don't even know what he was trying to do with the free kick. He wasn't going for placement.
It's like an Alan Shearer power strike.
Yeah, it was just, and then people just started to boo because it was so bad.
All right, he also had a pretty dismal penalty in that game. He did contribute an assist for the goal, which kind of turned the game back in Chelsea's favour. We'll come on to that match later on. There's lots to talk about, listeners. You probably know. In the league, big win for Fulham over Spurs, 3-0. First time in 40 matches now that Spurs haven't scored a goal. There was a win for Burnley. Similar numbers involved there as they finally get a victory over Brentford in what could prove or not a key match down the bottom. And 1-1 it finished in another relegation scrap between the two teams on either side of the dotted line currently, Luton and Nottingham Forest. We'll touch on those matches a bit later on, but there's also the FA Cup, which saw on Saturday Man City dispatching Newcastle 2-0 at the Etihad. For you, Eddie Howe, the season is over. It also saw that remarkable comeback, that classic cup contest between Wolves and Coventry City, which went the Sky Blues way to the tune of 3-2. As a result, Coventry in the FA Cup semi-final will be facing Man United, who in an epic encounter at Old Trafford on Sunday beat Liverpool 4-3, while City will be facing that Chelsea team, featuring old boys potentially like Raheem Sterling and Cole Palmer. Chelsea were 4-2 winners eventually, but that barely scratches the surface of that encounter. Plenty of twists and turns. Anyway, what say we begin with the one freshest in our minds? Man United 4, Liverpool 3. Tears on a young lad's face at the end after Diallo's dramatic winner in extra time. A game that actually began with tears on a young lad's face in the tunnel while holding Bruno Fernandes's had. I don't know if that was ever explained, the context of that. The poor lad was distraught. And then every now and then he'd look up at Bruno like he feared some more. But in between, though, what happened?
Lots of action, absolutely no control. It's almost an unanalysable game because of all the things that are there. A lot of them weren't planned. At the end, you had Bruno Fernandes as a centre-back. You had Anthony playing left-back. You had Liverpool completely dominating the game and all of a sudden being dominated by Man United going forward, causing the counter-attack. No midfield, just the ball pinging back and forward. People describing it like a basketball game, but it's not a basketball game, but they want it to be a basketball, but it's not. It was very fun. One of the most fun FA Cup games to watch. It kind of made the weekend, all the games seem better. It was the highlight of them all at the end. Became a classic, didn't it? Do you think?
Yeah. I mean, it's been described as a classic. I don't know. I hear what you're saying about the chaos.
Yeah.
And maybe that lack of a kind of discernible plan made it feel less of a classic encounter of two whopping teams and more just a bewildering blizzard of shots and chances.
Yeah, and I also think, which is quite rare in modern football, that it was sort of a war of attrition, and who was still standing at full time. You know, players are so uber fit these days. But you had Liverpool just looked knackered to me.
Yeah, for sure.
This was their 18th game of the calendar year compared to 12 for United, and we know the injuries they've had.
Plus, they were playing on Thursday night, unlike Man United.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you had United, Fernandes on one leg, McTominay could barely run because he had cramp, and it was just survival of the fittest at the end. Really, I still don't know how Man United did it, to be honest.
Well, the extra time was the maddest bit of a mad encounter. You had 3 goals.
Which never happens, right?
Well, yeah, unless it's, I don't know, Italy, Germany or something like that. Harvey Elliott striking first in the 105th minute to swing things in Liverpool's favour. But then we've just been talking about what a normal game Darwin Núñez had. And then he tried that cross-field ball, which went so spectacularly wrong, and all of a sudden Rashford was through and
in the danger
scores.
zone as well. You can't make that pass there. Like you never have to do that. But then that's a thing you might just switch off. Maybe when you're mentally fatigued, you just play that pass that you shouldn't play. The whole game has loads of great narrative bits to it. If you're trying to write headlines or make a newspaper article out of it, I mean, you've got McTominay scores. I think everyone expected him to do that. Salah scores. Of course, it's going to happen. McTominay sets up Rashford. McTominay's involved again. Rashford becomes the hero once more. Bruno Fernandes plays like literally every position on the pitch. Not even by choice. He's told, like, he does it sometimes himself. So he's told to by the manager here. Anthony justifies a tiny part of his transfer fee with a goal. Right, so he's a bit of redemption.
The Anthony goal, yeah. So which one was that?
That was it not the second one that United scored, wasn't it?
Right.
Because
Yeah,
the third
to take
was
us to
Rashford's.
extra time. That one.
Taking us to
Yeah.
extra time. Okay, which was a very well taken shot for someone who'd only scored 1 goal a season.
It was on his right foot as well.
Ooh, yeah.
It was, wasn't it? And he doesn't have a right foot. So that's, like, Anthony uses his right foot is as much of a narrative point as any others in this entire list I've got. And then you've got Harvey Elliott stepping up, fulfilling his potential with that, like, wonder strike. It takes a deflection, sure enough, but that's like I really like Harvey Elliott as a player, but I think he lacks that output bit where you get the goals and the numbers out of him. It's quite a good footballer. You get lots of good footballers who don't get the numbers. I think that's important for his career in Liverpool that he gets them. Then, of course, you have, like, United's, the story of their season, well, tactically anyway, if that is a story in itself, is how they press with, like, 5 players normally. Today it was 6. You had Diallo coming inside the pitch, so they had this... Wan-Bissaka was doing like a man-marking job on Salah on the right, and Liverpool have this thing they do where they pull Salah out of that position to drag that player out of position, then fill the gap with someone else. And they did that loads of times in this game, didn't adapt to it. But United have loads of players who press forward. They have a heap of vertical space between the furthest forward player and the centre-backs, which creates an enormous amount of space in the middle of the pitch, which is where everyone goes through them. But then it's almost as if they know that and they practice for it, so they just block off the middle of the pitch when they're in these 5v4s and 6v3 situations at the back. And so when the team has it, they slow them down, and then it's almost as if the team on the ball has too many options. They don't know where to go with it. They slow them down, block the middle, and the ball has to go wide, and then you can just get rid of it.
Right. You say it's almost as if they practice for this. Are you beginning to think that Ten Hag has a plan and we're seeing it?
This happens in every game for United, so there's no way that Ten Hag doesn't know it. So I wonder whether it's... he sees it as though they'll put loads of players forward, because that should mean that the defending team has to bring players backwards to make sure they get an overload deeper, which then means they're safer at the back anyway, if that makes sense. So with the time that teams do break through them, they've got to run, and there's normally a distance. So there's a huge amount of space between the defence and the next line of the team, or there's only just Kobe Mainoo or Casemiro on their own defending roughly 100 square yards of pitch space. And so they'll just run at them, but then you slow them down so they can't do anything with the ball. You block the middle bit of the goal because that's the best bit to shoot from. Have to force them wide, and as soon as the ball goes wide, they just latch onto them and then stop it going in. They concede loads of chances. I think they conceded more shots than any team in the Premier League, I think, this season. But
how many?
Oh, it's like 457 or something like that. I might actually be right with that. And then I'd laugh if I was right. But then the XG they've conceded is really low as well. So the value of chances they're conceding is actually very low. So they're conceding loads of chances, and it looks like they're getting absolutely done in. But the quality of chances is low. So it's kind of all right.
Okay. And they ran out 4-3 winners. What did you see in all of that, Tim?
Well, also to add, you've got to talk about the match winner, who's played 47 minutes all season, Amad Diallo. He's last started a game for United in August 2021. He's been on loan at Rangers and Sunderland since then. He was injured for the first half of the season. United have had a host of injuries in attacking areas they could have done with him for sure. Certainly looking on the evidence of what we saw today. It was just such a great finish because Garnacho's pass is not great.
Well, so it was actually a Liverpool corner.
Yeah, Liverpool
United
corner.
have equalised. Liverpool up the other end, exerting some of that pressure without actually fashioning really good chances, like you're saying. And then?
Yeah, Endo and Elliott, I think, got in a muddle, and Garnacho is suddenly belting into the Liverpool half. Again, he looks absolutely shattered. His socks are down, which is always the sign of a tired player. And it's sort of 2-on-1 with...
It's like the stamina bar in real life.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. 2-on-1 with Conor Bradley, and... the pass is behind Diallo, but his first touch to get out of his feet and into the shooting zone is perfect. And then he just places it in the corner, celebrates with the fans, shirt off, everyone's in tears, and then, of course, he's sent off. And it's just an astonishing moment of drama.
Presumably he was trending as well, but he won't see it, will he? Because he deleted his Instagram account last week after taking out all references to Manchester United in it.
Oh.
He was questioned about that and used his Snapchat to tell everybody that he's deleted his Instagram account so he can focus on Ramadan.
Oh, that's nice. Okay. So one of those rare days when we praise Man United, and JJ, fantastic job of doing that, remembering how. What can they do with it going forward?
I mean, Man United drew...
They drew Coventry.
Coventry, right. So
Coventry.
Surely they'll go through. Well, Coventry were fun to watch and good against Wolves, right? But surely United should beat them. City in the final.
Okay, well, we'll talk about the Wolves Coventry City game a little bit later on. And Tim, maybe you have a view on whether this particular brand of chaos magic will work against the Sky Blues and former Man United man Mark Robbins.
Oh, yeah, FA Cup narrative there for sure.
Yeah. But that's a little bit later on. I feel. Is there anything else we can glean from this apart from the fact that it was a pretty mad 120 minutes? And as you say, one that kind of infused the whole FA Cup weekend with a pretty rosy glow, because there wasn't really a bad, apart from Man City Newcastle, there wasn't really a flat game in there, was there?
Should give Marcus Rashford some credit because he missed two really good chances, didn't he? And probably the goal that he took was the most difficult of the three that he had.
So he was running hard at the end as well. Like he was it looked like he often runs out of energy early. He doesn't do any of the actual tackling that you need to do or be aggressive enough to try and stop bodies or passes going through where your space is, but he was still running at the end, which sounds like the bare minimum, really, if you're a footballer. But yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I quite like how looking at how like Liverpool were the better team for most of that. I would have said, and there was that period of time in the game where they had the ball. United couldn't get close to them. Couldn't get the ball off them for about 10. It felt like 10 minutes. It was probably only about 5, but it felt like they really were just drilling them in. And like I said before, is that they had too many options on the ball. It seemed too easy almost sometimes.
Well, yeah, including for the big chance. When it was
so 5-on-2.
Which is in this sort of period. It felt like, 60 to 85th minute, where they were just in complete control. We all kind of felt the game was going nowhere, and United had nothing left in them, which is why they've come back. And they could have won it in stoppage time, United, let alone drawn it.
With the Rashford chance.
With the Rashford chance, although I think there was a suggestion that might have been offside.
What happened to Liverpool then? You mentioned their calendar of late and the fact that they had played on Thursday against Sparta Prague.
I think it's felt almost every week like they're going to the well, and lots of last minute goals and late goals, and it's probably been underplayed just how well they've been doing with the resources as stretched thin as they have been.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's I don't know. It's a cliche, but I guess it felt like a game too far. They looked tired, even when they were 2-1 up. They looked.
And chasing that corner like at the very end, chasing back. It's just you just don't have it left in you to do anything with it. I don't think you should take anything away from or say that Liverpool didn't do well, or it is because they're tired. It is just that I would have said, yeah.
Well, this frees up their Canada nicely in those semi-finals. Worry about Matt.
Yeah, and they might make a case. They go to Old Trafford, don't they? In a couple of weeks' time in the Premier League, one could make a case that might be a more significant game for them. It didn't feel sustainable to go for all four, but then once you get to the semi-finals, that it for Jurgen Klopp at Wembley, potentially.
Crikey. All right, well, that was Man United 4, Liverpool 3. Next up, let's touch on the 6 goals that we got between Chelsea and Leicester a little bit earlier on Sunday. Matt, briefly, the story of the game. Chelsea go 2 goals up in the first half, and then Leicester come back in the second half through that catastrophic Disasi own goal and a brilliant Mavadidi strike. Yeah, wow, what a goal. And then they're looking on top before that red card, Callum Doyle on Nicholas Jackson, and then Chelsea come back. But that's not even, as I say, that's the outlines. You can now, colour it in for us.
Yeah, well, I mean, Mark Cucurella scored a goal, and that was the least surprising thing that happened in the match, really. It was kind of the Raheem Sterling show in a lot of ways, and fortunately for him, Chelsea went on to win the game. It was kind of crazy because Leicester were okay. I was surprised at how strong the team was they put out. I think the fact that the international break was coming up probably played into their hands in that regard. So other than Vardy, who was left at home, it was pretty much full strength from them. And Chelsea were by far the better team in the first half up until the point where they get the penalty, which Sterling is fouled for. Raheem Sterling has a 50% conversion rate for penalties in his career, I believe, which made it particularly odd that he took this penalty when Cole Palmer hasn't missed one for Chelsea. It was a pretty feeble effort. He then misses a one-on-one a couple of minutes later, but then provides an excellent assist for Palmer to score himself in stoppage time, and you think this is all going swimmingly. And then, the Disasi own goal does what has happened to Chelsea quite a lot this season, which is just inflicts a state of panic on them, which leaves everybody kind of grasping at thin air, trying to get a foot on the ball and control the game, and Leicester sense that, and Mavadidi scores the brilliant goal, and Chelsea make a substitution to take Mikhailo Mudryk off, which causes uproar because it's Mudryk and not Sterling. Mudryk had actually played pretty well in the game.
So loud booing at this point from the Stamford Bridge crowd.
And it kind of had to be Sterling who came off first for that not to be the case, I think, which is a sad state of affairs, but he's a scapegoat for this Chelsea project in a lot of ways, unfortunately, through not much fault of his own because of the size of his salary and the fact that he is the experienced player who plays in the team every week. And today he had a stinker, as Tim said. He hit a free kick that nearly hit me as I was walking through Brompton Cemetery on the way to the studio. It was that bad. But what I like about Sterling is that he doesn't seem to let this kind of thing affect him. The fact he took that free kick, the fact that he went through one-on-one but it's not a good look for him, definitely. Okay. But he's got Cole Palmer next to him, and he takes all the focus because he's an absolutely outstanding footballer who ought to be in the conversation for Player of the Year, one would think, depending maybe on where Chelsea finish in the league. But
Young Player of the Year?
Definitely Young Player of the Year, I think, unless, because I would probably put Foden up for Player of the Year. But the quality of the goals in this game was absolutely ridiculous. Palmer's assist for Chukwuemeka's finish is more difficult than it looks, I think. And then Madueke's, which is a bit of a disappointing deflection, but the
build-up to that, he kind of shuffles through
absolutely extraordinary. And it's been a week of brilliant entertainment at Stamford Bridge with the game at Newcastle on Monday as well. But there's still this kind of Rafa Benitez feel of there's a manager who most of the supporters will not take to regardless of what he does. And when something happens, like he takes off Mudryk instead of Sterling, the fans kind of jump all over that.
Right.
And it's a really difficult line for him to toe, I think. And I'm not sure what the end game is that will be positive for Mauricio Pochettino ultimately.
Post-game this afternoon, he was spending a lot of his time talking about the unrest from the fans, the dissatisfaction from supporters. And it kind of feels like Chelsea are through, but the cracks just get broader and broader every week.
Yeah, but, they still might qualify for Europe through the league and they still might win the FA Cup. So is that going to paper over them? Quite possibly.
League Cup final as well.
They got to the League Cup final. They probably should have won that game, but then the narrative becomes one where it's Pochettino can't win finals in England. So can he turn this round? I'm not really sure whether he can, but there are signs that Chelsea are fashioning something of a team, and that some of these players, like Mudryk in particular, are starting to justify the faith that was shown in them. But you just look at it and think you could do with 2 or 3 really experienced players, and they have 2 of them, and one doesn't speak English, and one's not doing his bit for the team at the moment, and that's where the problems are coming from. But look, they won the game. They're through to a semi-final, which they will almost certainly not win against Manchester City.
Right. What was your view from the top of a London bus, Tim?
I thought Leicester made it a really good game, to be honest. They were very open, probably too open. Chelsea XG was 4.77 for this one. And the Disassi own goal will stay with me for a while, and probably deserves a bit of our analysis and attention, as soon as he was scored from 20 yards out.
He got a hit from Daka as he goes to clear the ball. I think that does make a difference to it. But
it comes off more of his shin rather than his boot, I guess.
Yeah, but it's...
where was Sanchez while all this was happening?
He was going where he thought the ball was going to go, and it turned out...
Edge of the D, basically, yeah.
Although this is one of my major bugbears with TV coverage, they didn't actually show it live because they were showing a replay, which is just infuriating. Your minimum requirement is to show us the football match, right? But they were showing some ridiculous replay.
I bet the director was devastated, though. They're like,
should have done his job then. No. But yeah, it was a good game. I enjoyed it. Leicester are really stylish to watch, and what I loved about them was that when they had a rare opportunity to counter-attack Chelsea, and you'd sort of get Daka one-on-one running at a defender, and you got 6,000 Leicester fans with a big roar of encouragement to keep running, they would always stop and play it back, and retaining possession was the be-all and end-all. And Dewsbury Hall was like the master at this. He just kept them ticking along. It just showed quite a mature...
But that has infuriated Leicester fans this season. But you can really see the Pep influence on Maresca, because you had Hamza Chowdhury, who I thought of as a kind of jobbing central midfielder, playing right back but coming into midfield all the time, and Doyle playing left back and he's a centre back, and it's all like really quite difficult to follow and complicated, and
Doyle, who eventually got sent off, and after that, even though they were playing with 10 men, Leicester still looked the better side through a period, maybe not, but they didn't look like they were playing with a disadvantage for the spell that followed that.
Yeah, and I think the key for Chelsea was, Chelsea are excellent at scoring late goals to win games, by the way. They did that in the previous round against Leeds, and they did it again here. But patience, your worry was they were going to get caught on the break. Again, it comes down to the experience thing, but you wanted somebody to get on and say, look, you're going to have an extra half an hour to win this game against 10 men. You should be able to do it. You don't need to win it now. But thankfully, they didn't listen to that, and they just did it anyway.
I read that Chelsea have made another interesting off-field acquisition, and it's Brentford set-piece designer, Bernardo Cueva, who you've previously mentioned in this pod, JJ.
Yeah, I think he's a bit of a genius. He's made Brentford one of the, if not the best set-piece coaches, or the set-piece teams, in the entire of the Premier League, if not the world. They do incredible things at every set-piece, but a set-piece isn't just a free kick or a corner. It includes second phase of a corner, or say you pass it short from a corner, then you pass it along to the middle of the pitch and you move it on. That still counts as part of the set-piece. Anything that's automated almost. Even things like if the team attacking you crosses the ball in and your goalkeeper catches it, you might even consider something like that a sort of repeatable pattern, where I don't know whether he'd be in charge of those, but you definitely see things like that for Arsenal. There's definitely ways they built corners. If David Raya can catch that and go, there's a set piece there. Now Brentford, I had not the majority of their goals, I don't think anyone has, but the majority of score by set pieces. Arsenal maybe close this season. A big, huge amount of the things that they do and score and do well from are from set pieces, including things like they win lots of penalties from set pieces. They have things in place. It's all about timing as well. It's really, really it's fun to watch when you start looking at where the centre backs will be and where they are by the end of the move. So the throw-in might go somewhere. That triggers one part of a move to drag someone to another part of the pitch or the box. And then you'll see Christopher Ayer scored a goal, I think, against Burnley, actually, which is just timing of a run, which is something definitely trained. So where they wait until the ball is about to go, and then when the defender hasn't moved, they run across them to get into the space that wasn't there without making the run at exactly the right time. But you have set pieces where you have one player darts at exactly the right time to be there to have the flick on, which then means someone else then darts exactly the right time to be there to have the header to put it in.
Sounds good.
It's great. So he can make a huge difference to Chelsea, yeah.
All right. Didn't work out too well for Brentford, of course, this weekend.
Well,
Beaten 2-1 away to Burnley, but there was a red card. There was a red card right early on, which had a big bearing on that. We'll touch on the Premier League a little bit later on. But next up, we're off to Molineux for Wolves 2, Coventry 3. Tim Spiers. Coventry scoring 2 goals in stoppage time here to win 3-2. And the 8th place in the Championship, Sky Blues now into the semi-finals, making, they hope, the first of 2 trips to Wembley this season. Who knows, eh? Scratch his chin. Now, Daniel Storey was very much in love with this game and called it, he said, extraordinarily good goals and forward play in general, bags of entertainment and energy. This was one of the great cup ties.
Oh, glad he enjoyed it.
Yeah. Others perhaps less of a Wolves persuasion, of course, because you went through the full gamut of emotions. You were down, and then you were up, and then you were down again.
Well, in very quick succession. It was 1-0 after 83 minutes, and somehow ended up 3-2. And there were 2 dramatic late comebacks.
Yeah, so you guys had your late comeback, and then it was done to you. A throwback game, is that fair? A lot of people seem to feel that it was a harking back to your classic FA Cup encounters of yore.
Yeah, bonkers, absolutely bonkers, and fantastic atmosphere, sort of a Midlands derby. And Coventry were spectacular, to be honest. They should have scored 6 or 7. I thought they were brilliant. Wolves were sort of missing 4-5 key. They haven't got many injured players, but they've got the key players out, namely their front 3 of Neto, Cunha and Hwang, and the backup Bellegarde. So you had teenage striker Nathan Fraser up front. But it was completely their own fault because they let 2 strikers go in January. And Coventry should have been... Well, Jose Sarr was Wolves' man of the match, which kind of says it all, really. And I thought they fully merited their victory, even though they left it a little bit late. But it was a wonderful game, and Coventry, who were struggling so badly in November, almost in the relegation zone in the Championship, have gone on this crazy run of, I think they've lost 4 in 22 in the Championship under Mark Robbins,
which is exactly what they did last season.
Yeah, and he's in his 7th year in charge.
Right.
And
they were in the 4th tier when he took over?
Yeah, that's right. They were down in League 2, got them up at the first time of asking. But the things that they've had to go through as a club, they've had to leave their home twice in recent years to Northampton and to Birmingham. And, of course, they lost out in the player final last year to Luton. Sold 2 of their best players, and have rebuilt yet again. And in Casey Palmer and Haji Wright and Ellis Sims, who scored 8 goals in 5 games, believe it or not. They're on. They could well have 2 trips to Wembley this season, which is a logistical nightmare because the player final is the same weekend as the FA Cup final for some reason.
Okay, they need to get past Man United to do it. So JJ was wondering what their chances would be, or at least I was. What do you think, based on what you saw them do against Wolves?
I mean, they've got players to create chances and hurt any opposition, I would say. Certainly one as haphazard and lacking in control as Man United. I certainly think that they can cause them more than a few problems.
When's the semi-final coming up?
It is on the 20th of April.
Okay, a bit of a time to go.
Ellis Sims, by the way, Sean Dyche must have been watching that, kicking himself, because he's on loan from Everton, and Everton can't score. And Ellis Sims' goals have all been backloaded into the second half of the season, so I guess that there was no talk about recalling him. But you look at the way that he had a bad miss, didn't he, in this game? But the way that
awful.
He kind of ran Wolves ragged, and then you think about Beto and Dominic Calvert-Lewin, but then he could be really useful.
If you didn't have this loan, he might never have ever hit that form. And if you take him back now, he might drop out of it again. This might be exactly what you need. I think people often think that about this player. Oh, we should have played him the entire time. He wasn't ready at the time. He had to go out and have a wee bash somewhere else and learn his trade.
Fair enough.
Say the same for Amad, I suppose, couldn't you? Because he was brilliant at Sunderland last season.
Matt, you've seen a fair amount of commentary yourself. And talked about it in your wonderful What the EFL podcast. What can you tell us about Mark Robbins?
It's a funny one. He's not a glamorous manager, which is why I don't think that anybody ever sort of links him with another job. I know that Adi Vivash, who played a big part in a lot of the Chelsea players who've come through over the last decade or so, does a lot of the kind of day-to-day coaching. He's his assistant, but Robbins is your archetypal kind of steady hand on the tiller kind of manager, unless a ball boy irks him, in which case,
well, indeed,
he loses his mind. But Coventry have had decent draws to this point. It's probably, Wolves away is difficult, but they had Oxford, Sheffield Wednesday and Maidstone before that, so that does kind of colour the cup run a bit. But he's a manager who gets the best out of what he's got, and players like Casey Palmer, who had a sort of really nomadic career, having come through the Chelsea academy, seems to have been getting a tune out of him on a consistent basis. Again, is it as important to them as getting promoted? Probably not. But to recover from losing the playoff final in the way that they did last season, and then making such a bad start to the season for the second time round, he's obviously got loads of credit in the bank for the fact he's gotten from League Two up to the Championship playoff final. But there are plenty of other clubs who would have dispensed with his services around November time of this year. So Coventry deserves some credit for sticking with him, definitely.
All right. A man who's famous for risking a manager's job, doing that for himself. No, can't find any better way of saying that. Anyway, we'll move on to, Man City and the 2-0 win over Newcastle. 2 deflected first-half goals from Bernardo Silva here. And Newcastle season effectively over.
I didn't watch this game, but I did laugh when I heard Pep Guardiola's post-match interview with the BBC, where he said we won Premier Leagues and the Champions League, but we were humble enough to win 4 Carabao Cups in a row as well. In talking about why he takes the domestic cup so seriously. What is that? A sign of humility?
Make your CV or your achievements look better when you win them all. I think that it counts as a cup. It's massive.
Oh, massive, cup, yeah. But is it humble to say, we were humble enough to win it 4 times in a row?
Yeah. Not convinced. We stooped to conquer.
Yeah.
There's an interesting thing in this game, maybe slightly, in that Newcastle changed their system, which they haven't done at all for, the entire time Eddie Howe's been there.
I think it was since his first game in charge. This is the first time they played.
It's the first time it changed.
Played back 5, yeah.
So what is
How radical a change was it?
Very. It went from a 4-3-3 to a 5-3-2.
Ooh.
Playing Anthony Gordon up front next to Alexander Isak. In a sort of system you'd normally associate with being very defensive, hard to break down and then hit them on the counter-attack. And they just were never allowed to, because Man City don't allow you to counter-attack. It's the whole point of everything they do is everything's built around controlling everything. So like Dan Burn playing his left wing back, just getting caught with Bernardo Silva coming onto his left. So Dan Burn's left-footed obviously then makes it hard to tackle on your right. There's that tiny little margin of errors where the first deflected goal comes from. But Newcastle never really looked into this at all to me. They looked kind of... didn't have the energy. Like the spirit, intensity, the atmosphere that was around them last season just isn't there this season. And I guess it kind of makes sense when you can't really compete for the same things you're competing. So what's the real motivation? They've been missing people along the way, but that's their season done now. Kind of sucks, isn't it?
All right, well, that's our analysis of Man City Newcastle, unfortunately, as well. Oh, no, Tim.
Well, I just said the most interesting thing about this game is that Man City's game away at Spurs in the league has now been postponed, and it looks like the only free week is the last week of the season.
Oh,
which could be, they've got terrible...
So they might have a double-header in the final week?
So they'll play, midweek ahead of the last game, it looks like. And they've got a terrible record at Spurs, of course, so that'll be tasty.
Wow. We'll touch on matters in the Premier League and lots of other exciting things like your trip to Ajax, or at least to Birmingham to see Ajax, next. Friday saw Champions League quarter-final and semi-final draws, and for UEFA's secondary and tertiary competitions as well, the Europa League and Europa Conference Leagues. All sorts of drama in store here as Arsenal pulled Bayern Munich out of the hat. And if they get through that, they'll face either Real Madrid or Manchester City, the other side of the Champions League draw. Sees Atletico Madrid going up against Borussia Dortmund, the winners of which will be taking on Paris Saint-Germain and Barcelona, who go again. All sorts of illustrious and at times hilarious precedents in those ties. We'll be, of course, going through all of that in Totally Football Show's European edition, which will be out on Tuesday. We'll do the Europa League draw as well, the Conference League as well, which saw Aston Villa get Lille, having beaten Ajax 4-0 Thursday night. Emphatic display from Unai Emery's side. Tim, you were there at Villa Park with a very special mission.
Mission Jordan Henderson. Yeah,
Nice.
I was there specifically to watch Jordan Henderson for 90 minutes.
Okay, what did you come away with?
Well, the week before, I was asked to listen to Gary Neville's commentary for 90 minutes, so I don't know what I've done wrong, Jimbo, to be honest. But
you also had to write an article this week about Carragher's clanger.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, less said about that, the better.
Although it contains a great line in it. When Mika Richards isn't laughing, you know you're in trouble. Anyway, this one about Jordan Henderson also contains some great lines where you basically dress Jordan up as Kaiser Soze. I think that was a reference, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Got that one. Anyway, what did you see? What kind of impact? Is he growing the game there in Amsterdam, etc. and so on?
Well, he set record shirt sales in Amsterdam. No player's name has been plastered over the back of an Ajax shirt and bought by fans in the club. More than Jordan Henderson's.
Right, and that was a big story when he moved there. Have the shirt sales slowed dramatically across his 8 games, 1 win period so far?
Yeah, I think his reputation's taken a slight hit. Rafael van der Vaart came out and said, castigated him basically, said all he does is pass sideways and backwards. This is sort of...
Well, there's the running and pointing as well. Does Rafa not see that?
I think there's more the point with of how differently fans over there view football through a different prism in terms of beauty and creativity, and Henderson stands for the opposite of that. But also in terms of how he's such a sleeves up and humble type guy, whereas they prefer a bit more arrogance.
Did you speak to Dutch journos following Ajax at Villa Park?
Yeah, a couple of them, and some of them have been quite harsh about him. Really, I think he's been made captain as well, which I didn't realise until he comes out with his fluorescent armband on. He was great at pointing, but one of the biggest sort of takeaways from the night for me was that Villa were 3-0 up against Ajax, and yes, Ajax aren't who they were, but it's still an incredibly big occasion, and they're a huge name in European football, and Villa are beating them 3-0. And before the kickoff has started, all they're doing is singing about Jordan Henderson. It was just crazy. Like there are 3 or 4 songs for him on the night, none of which I can really repeat right now. But it just kind of showed, this fixation towards him and this anger towards him, and how he's not just a figure of fun. Like people just seem to hate him. It's probably gone a bit too far, really. When you think of players who've been convicted or accused of crimes that play in football and don't get half as much attention as he does. He's sort of admitted it was a mistake to move to Saudi Arabia, and he's moved to a different club, and it's probably best.
And basically wrote off his wages in doing so.
Yeah, exactly.
I must admit, I'm surprised though that it isn't. That you feel it's not about fun. I thought that he had become almost the current banter king of the circus of football.
Yeah, there's probably an element of that. I think a lot of it is to do with less the Saudi Arabia stuff and more the fact that he keeps getting picked for England. Because people had it in for him pre-Saudi Arabia that he shouldn't have been in the squad. And you can't make an argument that he's one of the best 5 or 6 English midfielders. Well,
apparently you can.
Playing.
So what does Gareth Southgate say when he's asked about this?
I think it's more to do with what, in the similar vein to Conor Cody when he was in the squad, it's more the things he does that we don't see, in terms of his leadership and how he takes care of others in the squad and the way he is behind the scenes.
Set standards and training.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And, England don't have too many sort of experienced players of his age, I'm probably right in saying.
Yeah.
But I think in a 26-man squad you can get away with that, but with 23... and you look at someone like Mainu or someone like James Ward-Prowse,
Loftus-Cheek,
who are going to get nowhere near it. And Henderson's sort of guaranteed his place. And then you look at Calvin Phillips being told or advised by Southgate to sign for West Ham rather than Juventus because you need to be playing in a better league to guarantee your England place. And yet Henderson goes to Saudi Arabia and the Netherlands and just gets picked every time. So, he's obviously a favourite, and if you're not performing up to scratch, which he's not, to be honest. In the games I've seen him this season, it looks like he's lost half a yard. He looked out of his depth the last time I saw him play for England, and he was nowhere near Ajax's best player in midweek.
Why does he need to go as a player if he's that important for the standards that he sets? Just give him the Beckham honorary. You can complain to the referee that ball was actually over the line when Frank Lampard struck
the Scott Carson rule.
Place on him, yeah. And why do you need somebody to set standards in training for an international football team? Odd.
I mean, those things do definitely apply, right? Because it's a group of young adults, but you're young men, and if you have people who set, like you don't get away with being a bit of an idiot. You don't get away with being late for anything. I don't know. I'm trying to think of examples of where it can apply. I think it's useful to have those characters within a squad. I think making a good football team in a squad is more than just having good players. I think it's also about combining the characters. And even if it's not good for them right now, it'll be good for the younger ones in the future to see how you're meant to lead and be like that.
Do you think he still has the authority though, or has he been?
Yeah,
kind of
I think so. I think
undermined.
other footballers would respect him as a
Really?
footballer. I think even though they would know that he's not the best technically, like I've been quite harsh on Jordan Henderson, but meant in jest. Like he's obviously a good player. He's won almost everything there is. But I think the mental side of the game is really important. If you have young players that you bring through, you want to try and make them learn from the very best. It's like when you look at teams like Chelsea, you rip out the core of it and what the standards are and what it means to play for that team or country, and then you put in others underneath it. They don't understand it, and then the message is sort of mixed. And that's probably, looking at this as a Scottish person, the thing that Southgate's done best with England is make
Right.
them acceptable to watch.
So the Scotland fans making the case for keeping Jordan Henderson in the England
Harry
squad.
Kane's
I
quite a
think
good trainer,
if you
isn't he?
keep Harry Maguire, Gareth Southgate, and Jordan Henderson going forward, I think that's, I'm all for it.
Nice. Anyway, all right. Well, we'll talk much more about the internationals, which is coming up next weekend, and probably before that, probably from Thursday. In Thursday's Totally Football Show. Also, out on the podcast front, you've got Full Time Europe, which is the Athletics women's football podcast. That's due out on Tuesday. And I imagine they'll be touching on another game that you were witness to at Stamford Bridge, Chelsea-Arsenal, Friday night.
Yeah, obviously there is one big talking point that's come from the game, which didn't actually revolve around the game so much.
So this was kickoff being delayed half an hour due to clashing socks.
Yes.
And how did they resolve that?
Chelsea lent Arsenal some socks and then pulled their pants down, basically.
Right, nicely done. So how bad was the clash of sock colour then?
Well, they had white socks and Chelsea had white socks too, which is apparently there's this. I wasn't aware of this. You probably are, JJ. There's an online portal where you put in what
I know of
kind
all the
kit
portals,
you
yeah.
want to play in a couple of weeks before the game, and it matches up, and somebody's supposed to say, yeah, okay, there's no clash of kits here.
But
and Arsenal
socks are a
put
key
white
thing,
socks
though.
in, and it
No, I
was
assumed
okay.
it was like on FIFA where you just push along the button until your kits are...
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But obviously the Arsenal men's team had worn red socks at Stamford Bridge earlier in the season, so one would have assumed that this would have followed the same pattern.
Right.
But yeah, they got some Chelsea socks from the club shop and promptly were roundly beaten in the game, which is hugely significant for the WSL title race because it might well have knocked Arsenal out of it, and Arsenal play Chelsea in the League Cup final end of this month at Molineux, and that could well determine, I think, whether Jonas Edeval keeps his job for next season, because it's been a pretty rotten one for him and Arsenal, all told. They didn't get through the Champions League qualifiers, they're out of the FA Cup. This is basically what they're going for now, and what should have been a glorious victory for Chelsea in what will be a last game at Stamford Bridge for Emma Hayes. She then finds herself having to backtrack on comments that she made before the game, which went big on The Athletic about player relationships. Obviously, been a big talking point in women's football, coach and player relationships. She commented on relationships between players, saying that they can be inappropriate, which is awkward, given that two of her players are in a relationship and have been for many years. That caused a bit of opprobrium with one of them, Jess Carter, who didn't look particularly pleased at the end of the game on Friday night. So yeah, loads of talking points.
Loads of talking points.
Lots of which will be discussed on Straight Outta Cobham.
Oh yeah, of course. From an Arsenal point of view, Jonas, they didn't have the socks, but he might get the sack. That was the headline that I was working on while you were saying a lot of more important things. Anyway, Premier League. So Burnley beat Brentford 2-1. Brentford playing with 10 players after Reguilon's mad foul. Luton 1-1 with the Nottingham Forest. 89th minute, Luke Berry equaliser here, stopping Forest going 6 points clear for now. It kept the gap as 3 points between the two teams. Fulham spanking Spurs 3-0, which was a bit of a shock because, of course, Spurs had smashed Villa last weekend. But because Aston Villa only drew 1-1 away at West Ham, Spurs are still within reach of the top four spots. They're in 5th, which is just outside the Champions League places, or is it, etc., and so on, while we wait for the coefficient thing to be settled. Of those matches, Luton Forest leaps out at me from a piece of paper that you've just passed me, Matt, saying, talk about Luton Forest. Signs of the Footballing Times, part 94, home fans singing, points deduction, it's coming for you. Oh, is it, Matt?
Well, yeah, probably. But if you're not putting any points on the board anyway, or only one in a game that you absolutely dominate for the most part against a team with 10 injured players and fullbacks playing at centre-back and people hobbling around the pitch, then, yeah, it's not really about the points deductions. Forest have been chronically mismanaged at every level throughout this season. They had one thing that was keeping them together. Well, two things, actually. They had an award-winning chief executive called Dane Murphy, who hired Steve Cooper. Dane Murphy was promptly sidelined when Forest got promoted, sacked, sued the club for some money they owed him, eventually managed to get that. Steve Cooper miraculously managed to keep Forest in the Premier League last season, in large part by engendering an incredible spirit amongst a squad of strangers and a supporter base who worshipped him. And then for some reason, the owner and his cronies got thoroughly Mendezed in January. They got Nuno Espirito Santo in, who's now on 1 win in 9 league games, presiding over a team who concede from a set piece in virtually every game, insists on taking off his best attacking players whenever they're in the lead.
So this was the key thing in the game at Kenilworth Road?
It was one of, yeah, but poor mismanagement on his part. But yeah, I mean, if we could have Brentford, Mr. Cueva for some set-piece defending, that would be really nice. But yeah, I come back to this Mendes thing, why they thought that Nuno Espirito Santo was an upgrade on Steve Cooper. I guess that's a flip of a coin. But then you get Gio Reyna and Rodrigo Ribeiro foisted upon you in January, and Reyna's played 41 minutes and Ribeiro's played 1 minute, and it's these kind of nonsense signings that have got Forest in the position they are, whereby they're going to be deducted points on Monday. It's not like they even signed players who've made the team particularly better, so it's a really difficult one.
Could you not get points awarded to you if your transfers are that bad?
Well, you'd hope so, wouldn't you? But anyway, it's a difficult one to take at the moment because it feels like Forest had something beautiful going on and they've snatched it away from themselves with just rank bad decision making, which is hard to take, and it'll be even harder when we're back in the Championship for another 23 years as of May. Thanks, so that was helpful for me. It feels better to talk about it, I've got to say. Look, maybe it'll all be right. Forest have got Fulham and Palace next 2 games at home.
Are Fulham in good form? Oh, wait. Yes, I think they've won 3 of the last 4 and they just smashed Spurs 3-0. And they've got one of the form players of the second half of the season, the remarkable Rodrigo Muniz, who scored 2 goals in this game against Spurs, taking his tally to 7 in his last 7. Wow. Fulham they're a funny club because I think it's so long since we've seen them as anything other than a side kind of fumbling their way through relegation battles, that what they're doing at the moment, and they're still not particularly high in the table or anything, but they have shown on occasion some remarkable prowess as a football team. And this guy who's come in because of the injury to Raul Jimenez is now being talked of as a potential Brazil international. So, yeah, something's going on there at Craven Cottage.
Got a very good coach, haven't they?
Yeah.
I think. And actually their transfer business was pretty good over the summer. I think Alex Iwobi hasn't had much love, but he seems to be a really important player from being a jobbing Premier League midfielder.
He was good. I've only seen highlights of this game, but Iwobi looked involved in almost all of them. The problem that Fulham always have is that you don't. What they're trying to achieve, really, because it's impossible to break into that top 5. Probably, if you're sceptical or realistic, probably realistic, right? Unless you invest loads of money into it, but you can't really do that now. So you have to be really careful with your transfers. But then if they lose someone like João Palhinha in the summer, which is quite likely, it's a huge amount. It's just a huge figure to try and replace. Maybe they should sign more like Rodrigo Muniz all over the pitch.
Maybe they should. They should also get some credit for their defensive work because they are, as previously mentioned, the first team in 39 matches to stop Spurs from scoring.
Yeah, and also tactically they did a real number on Spurs' sort of biggest weakness, which is leaving space behind the wing-backs because they just bomb forward Porro and Udogie. So Fulham's full-backs, Timothy Castagna and Anthony Robinson, just had a field day, basically. That was where most of their attacking endeavours were concentrated. And, really funny one for Spurs because they probably produced their best performance of the season a week earlier when they dismantled Villa 4-0, and then this was probably their worst.
Well, yeah, Charlie Eccleshare.
All things considered, because, they got no injury problems anymore. So
yeah, no mitigating circumstances, says our colleague Charlie Eccleshare. This has to be the worst performance of the Postecoglou era. Woof. Okay. West Ham drew 1-1 with Aston Villa Sunday afternoon while all that cup stuff was going on. And the other game this weekend was Burnley getting a win. 2-1 against Brentford. As I mentioned before, that mad Reguilón challenge, which led to his sending off and the penalty, which put Burnley on their way. Burnley 8 points behind Forest, but we don't know where Forest are really. So is it safer to say that they're 5 points behind Luton? And that's doable, but yeah.
With an awful goal difference as well, it should be said. But yeah, Vincent Kompany celebrated with some meaning at full time. I mean, it's their first win of the year. So
did he actually smile for once?
It was like an angry roar, really. A lot of frustration sort of let out. It feels like this could be the lowest ever tally needed to stay up this year. You're looking at points deductions for Forest and maybe Everton. Luton are on 22 now with 9 games to go. I mean, how many are they going to earn from their final fixtures? No one's in form near the bottom of the table. The lowest tally of a team ever staying up is 34.
Okay.
Which was West Brom in the Great Escape season in the mid 2000s. Burnley are on 17 now, so they're on half of that total. But still, they're not out of it yet. With those points deductions to come, they could still stay up with a low 30s kind of tally.
Longest unbeaten run of the season as well. They're on 2 games. But felt significant that he changed the goalkeepers because James Trafford's really struggled, hasn't he? And Muric made some really impressive saves in this game, so maybe that'll help with the goal difference a little bit. Worry about Brentford next season, I've got to say. They're not going to go down this season, I don't think. But
they are
just losing the set-piece coach. But
Brentford are they 4 points off?
They're on 26 and Luton Town on 22.
But you think that with the prospect of points penalties for the rivals, they should be okay?
Yeah.
Forest, you think maybe even Monday, perhaps today as people hear this, that might come through?
That's what we're hearing, yeah.
And what about Everton?
I have no idea.
Okay.
But yeah,
what about Man City? That's what you were saying, listen, wasn't it?
That's, yes.
Nobody knows.
No. I'll play along with this for you, James.
But yeah, Brentford, if they've lost a vital member of their coaching staff for next season, they're going to lose Ivan Toney as well. They haven't really sort of regenerated that squad with loads of success, have they? Flecken's not been an amazing replacement for Rye. I feel like it'd be a really...
They've had a lot of big injuries this season, even like Vissa, for example, and Burmo, like missing those really important ones. Hickey's been going a lot of times. Losing Rico Henry on the left was massive because the majority of their play, if you look at their passing maps, you'll have seen this, right? It's all left. This is all left. So obviously that's going to have a huge impact. And when you're a team as light on resources as Brentford and big players, I think just losing even 2 of those it's too much of a difference to really take on. But to have them where they are, it's kind of all right. I think they'll be okay, but it'll be a big bit of how they recruit in the summer will be key because they can probably only do like 3 or 4 like key signings. I don't know how much money they ever will spend. Yeah,
and you want to be kind of not spending all of it on Nathan Collins, I guess.
Well, exactly. Like someone good enough to play to make you better is going to cost you minimum 30, 40 million unless you find an absolute gem who Brighton have already bought, probably.
Will they not get a bundle for Ivan Toney, or is he...
Potentially, yeah. It depends where they'd go and how much they want. For me, you think something like 70 or something, maybe. But then that's, 1 player plus wages and sign-on fees, and then maybe a little bit left for a depth player. So it's not a huge amount, really, because you've got to replace someone as good as Toney with someone else. Yeah.
You've got to get a bidding war going for Toney as well, to get a proper fee, because he's out of contract in 2025.
Easy.
So it's going to be massive money. And I don't know, Arsenal, maybe we might be interested in him. Not hearing loads of other teams thinking that he's the answer to their problems. So we'll see.
All right. A troubling note then for the Bees at the end of a remarkable weekend in so many ways. As mentioned, Totally Football Show returns on Tuesday with our European roundup. Lots of international talk perhaps, but definitely we'll be all over the cups and what's gone on in the various continental divisions this weekend. And then Thursday, more international chat again. I'm looking forward to that. Tim Spiers, many thanks for being with us today. And you, JJ Bull.
Hello.
You. And you, JJ Bull. And you, Matt Davies-Adams.
Very welcome.
Also to Liam and guest producer Jesse in the booth. And listener. So nice to see you again. Have a great time until we speak to you again. From all of us here, it's goodbye. The Totally Football Show podcast is available 3 times a week, bringing you all the football news you could reasonably be expected to care about. We've got views, we've got stats, we've got analysis, we've got some of the best football writers around, and the whole thing is absolutely free. So have a listen on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or all the usual places by clicking on the link below.